1 minute ago, the long-standing tension within the House of Windsor reached a point of no return. This isn't just a rift, it is a clinical, surgical excision. King Charles III, a man who spent decades caught between the love for his son and his duty to the crown, has finally made the most agonizing decision of his reign. The decree has been issued not through a loud public declaration, but through a chilling, absolute silence that echoes louder than any headline. Prince Harry is no longer just a non-working royal. He has been effectively exfiltrated from the royal ecosystem. The exile is complete. As you sit there watching, imagine the atmosphere inside the cold stone walls of Buckingham Palace. It is 7 a.m. sharp. The King's Inner Council has just concluded a meeting that changed the course of royal history. The agenda was singular: the containment of the Sussex fallout. For years, the world watched a game of will they won they regarding Harry's return. But today, the game ended. The King has rejected Harry's proposed terms for re-entry, with a finality that has left Montecito in a state of absolute shock. Harry's demands were not those of a son wanting to come home. They were the demands of a man trying to negotiate his way back into power through a fantasy he created in the hills of California. He wanted armed security at the level of a sovereign head of state. He wanted the gates of St. James's Palace to swing open for him. He even insisted that Princess Catherine, currently the spiritual heartbeat of the monarchy, be there to receive him at the tarmac. But the palace response was a masterclass in institutional power. The Crown does not negotiate with nostalgia. While the UK prepares for the grand tradition of the Christmas walk at Sandringham, thousands of miles away, the sun is setting over a garden in Montecito that is beginning to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded prison. Harry is trapped, not by walls, but by the consequences of a narrative that has finally run out of steam. In Hollywood, where relevance is the only currency, the Sussex brand is facing a bankruptcy of interest. The novelty has evaporated, replaced by a devastating reality. Harry is no longer a prince in exile. He is a prince in irrelevance. This is the anatomy of a final breakdown. It began with a call, a rejection, and a realization that the bloodline no longer guarantees the lifeline. The Sussex Empire, once envisioned as a global powerhouse to rival the monarchy itself, is now facing its final collapse. And as the night falls over California, the man who once believed love could rewrite 1,000 years of tradition is beginning to realize that when you walk away from the sun, the only thing left is the shadow. While Buckingham Palace maintains a chillingly efficient silence across the Atlantic in Montecito, California, the atmosphere is thick with a different kind of quiet, the suffocating silence that precedes a total structural collapse. The $14 million fortress, once marketed as a sanctuary of eternal love and defiance, has become a gilded pressure cooker. Prince Harry is not just being isolated by his father in London. He is being isolated by a truth he is no longer sure he can ignore. The fracture didn't begin with a loud argument. It began with a whisper from a woman who knows where all the royal bodies are buried. Sarah Ferguson. Sarah, the Duchess of York, has long been dismissed as a peripheral figure, but in the emotional geography of the House of Windsor, she is a witness. In early December 2025, she reportedly reached out to Harry, not with a direct accusation, but with a maternal suggestion that carried the weight of a lead pipe. She dropped a name, a location, and a phrase that has haunted the dark corners of the internet for years. The first client. This wasn't just gossip. It was a surgical strike at Harry's foundation. It pointed directly to Meghan's yacht, years a period Harry had been told was a fabrication of a racist press. But coming from Sarah, a woman who lived through the transactional reality of the 90 seconds, the suggestion felt devastatingly real. Imagine Harry now. He is no longer the fierce protector standing in front of cameras to shield his wife. He is a man obsessively scrolling through old timelines, re-examining the years before they met, and realizing that the woman he saw as the antithesis of royal corruption might have once been part of that very world, specifically the orbit of Prince Andrew. For Harry, who defined his modern identity by his moral distance from Andrew, this realization is soul-shattering. The psychological strain has pushed him to a point of no return. In a move that has sent shockwaves through their Montecito staff, Harry did the unthinkable. He repeated the very trauma that scarred his own childhood. He requested a private DNA test for Archie and Lilibet. This isn't just a lack of trust, it is a total breakdown of the family unit. By doing this, he reopened the wound from 1995, when King Charles quietly sought paternity confirmation for Harry himself. The cycle of betrayal has come full circle. Harry is no longer fighting the palace, he is fighting the mirror. Meghan's reaction has been one of calculated, freezing withdrawal. The Sussex Empire is no longer facing a PR crisis. It is facing an internal extinction. The love story that was supposed to rewrite history has hit a wall of cold, hard reality. As Harry paces the grounds of his estate, he is beginning to realize that the most dangerous enemy wasn't in London. It was the secrets he brought with him to the sanctuary. If King Charles III provides the emotional weight of this decision, his sister, Princess Anne, provides the cold, unbreakable spine. While the public looks for signs of a father's heartbreak, the Princess Royal has been operating with a surgical, unsentimental precision that Harry never saw coming. Within the inner corridors of the palace, Anne is known as the Enforcer, the woman who views the monarchy not as a family tree, but as a sacred constitutional trust. To her, Harry's attempt to bargain for royal perks while trashing royal principles isn't just a nuisance, it is a heresy. She has been the primary architect of what insiders are calling the Great Containment. The strategy employed by the king, under Anne's uncompromising guidance, is a masterclass in psychological warfare known as the Grey Rock method. It involves becoming so uninteresting, so unresponsive, and so bureaucratic that the person seeking a reaction eventually starves of attention. For years, Harry and Meghan fed off the palace's responses. Every leak, every briefing, every subtle no was a product they could sell to the highest bidder. But now, the shop is closed. By refusing to engage in a public war of words, Charles and Anne have effectively sucked the oxygen out of the Sussex brand. They realized that the only way to win a game of grievance is to stop playing. Think about the psychological impact this has on a man like Harry. He sends a legal demand through his high-priced lawyers. It is met with a polite, 3-sentence acknowledgement from a mid-level bureaucrat. He requests a summit with his father. He is told the king's schedule is finalized for the next 18 months. There is no anger, no shouting, and no public rebuke. There is only a wall of professional, polite indifference. This is the Iron Shield in action. It is a calculated, strategic exile designed to show Harry that the world and the crown keeps turning with or without him. But there is a darker, more painful layer to this strategy. By delegating all communication to lawyers and secretaries, King Charles has effectively removed the father from the equation. Harry is no longer dealing with Pa. He is dealing with the sovereign. When the emotional leverage of being the son is stripped away, Harry is left standing alone against a 1,000-year-old institution that remains unmoved by his feelings or his truth. This shift in tone is precisely what triggered the instability we are seeing in Inspector Montecito. Harry is discovering that when the king stops being a father, the prince stops being a person of interest. The institution hasn't just protected itself, it has effectively erased Harry's relevance by refusing to acknowledge his existence. The transition from the velvet-lined corridors of Buckingham Palace to the ruthless, metrics-driven boardrooms of Hollywood was supposed to be Harry's ultimate triumph. He traded 1,000 years of tradition for $100 million in streaming deals. But in 2025, the balance sheet has finally turned red. In Hollywood, a town built on the brutal cycles of novelty and exhaustion, the Sussex brand has hit its expiration date. Industry observers at outlets like Variety and insiders at Netflix are no longer whispering. They are speaking with a clinical, terrifying clarity. Harry is no longer viewed as a royal jewel. He is now categorized as exhausted potential. To understand the depth of this collapse, you must understand the psychology of the Hollywood elite. They don't care about your bloodline, they care about your draw. For the first few years, Harry's name opened doors because he was the forbidden fruit of the monarchy. But the novelty of the rebel prince has evaporated. Executives who once scrambled to sign him now see a man whose public relevance has become entirely derivative. He is no longer a producer, a philanthropist, or a thought leader in his own right. He has become, in the cruelest branding terms, decorative. Think about the psychological impact of the handbag prince phenomenon. At major industry events, Meghan is introduced as the Duchess, the star, the driving force. Harry, he follows 2 steps behind, an accessory to a narrative he no longer controls. For a man born into the highest echelons of military and royal authority, this is a slow-motion emasculation. The identity he traded his birthright for is now slipping through his fingers. He is visible yet structurally absent. He is a prince without a platform and a celebrity without a craft. The financial pressure is the hidden engine of this breakdown. When the Netflix gamble was made, it was based on the promise of exclusive access to the heart of the monarchy. But now that the palace has built its iron shield and King Charles has enforced the exile, there is no more access to sell. The product is gone. Harry is trapped in a Montecito mansion that costs millions to maintain, in a marriage under extreme tension, and in a career that has reached a dead end. Hollywood executives don't negotiate with nostalgia any more than the Crown does. They see a man who has lost his mystery. And in this town, once the mystery is gone, the money follows. The Sussex empire isn't just falling. It's being liquidated by the very industry Harry hoped would save him. Amidst the clinical rejections and the Hollywood brand collapse, there is one element of this exile that cuts deeper than any security detail or bank statement. It is the matter of the spiritual inheritance. When Harry contacted Buckingham Palace via his legal team in mid-December 2025, his tone was uncharacteristically emotional. He wasn't asking for his titles back. He was asking for access to a private archive of letters, photographs, and personal mementos left behind by his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. These items were never intended as wealth, they were intended as dignity. They were the items the late Queen had specifically earmarked for Harry's future reckoning. To understand why this is the ultimate flashpoint, you must understand the Queen's final strategy. Elizabeth II was a woman of immense patience. She saw Harry's volatility in his final years as a working royal, but she also held a quiet, grandmotherly hope that her favorite grandson would one day return not to rule, but to reconcile. She left behind records of duty, restraint, and private reflections intended to guide him back to himself when the noise of California finally faded. For Harry, these letters are his last remaining link to the man he used to be. They are the proof that he was once seen, trusted, and loved by the anchor of the family. But here is the chilling institutional reality. The palace has refused to release them. Under the advice of Princess Anne and the Lord Chamberlain's Council, the items have been placed under royal custodianship. The official line is that circumstances do not currently allow for their responsible transfer. In the cold language of the monarchy, this is a psychological evaluation. The palace views Harry as being in a state of identity collapse, and they believe that releasing these emotionally charged documents now would only provide more ammunition for his narrative of grievance, or worse, cause him a total mental break. Imagine the isolation Harry feels as he pacing the halls of Montecito, knowing that his grandmother's final words to him are sitting in a vault in London, guarded by the very people he has spent 5 years attacking. He sees it as a final act of cruelty. The palace sees it as an act of preservation. They are protecting the Queen's legacy from a man they no longer recognize. By withholding the inheritance, the Crown has sent its most devastating message yet. You are our blood, but you are no longer the keeper of our secrets. Harry is discovering that the most painful part of exile isn't being cast out. It's being forgotten while you are still shouting at the gate. For years, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, was dismissed as a royal footnote, a woman of scandal, charm, and limited consequence. But inside the emotional vault of the House of Windsor, Sarah occupies a much more dangerous role. She is a witness. She didn't just observe the collapse of the 90 seconds. She lived inside the machinery of the monarchy while it was bleeding. She watched the Princess of Wales, Diana, suffer through isolation and paranoia. She saw which royals were protected and which were sacrificed. Most importantly, she watched Prince Harry grow up in an environment where love was often conditional and appearances were everything. This is why her intervention in early December 2025 was so devastating. It didn't come from a place of institutional coldness. It came from a place of maternal intimacy. When Sarah reached out to Harry, she didn't use the language of a lawyer or a courtier. She used the language of an aunt who "we're members." She didn't provide a dossier of evidence. She provided a suggestion. In a brief cryptic communication, she dropped a phrase that has since become the architect of Harry's insomnia. The first client. By linking Meghan's mysterious yacht years to the orbit of Prince Andrew, the very man Harry has publicly spent years distancing himself from Sarah performed a feat of emotional arson. She didn't have to prove Meghan was involved in Andrew's transactional social world. She only had to make Harry wonder if she was. To Sarah, this wasn't necessarily about malice, it was about survival. With Prince Andrew's name resurfacing in legal and reputational contexts once again, Sarah understood a fundamental royal truth. To protect one legacy, you often have to entangle another. By suggesting that Meghan's past might be woven into the same dark web as Andrew's, she diluted the responsibility. If more names exist in the shadows, Andrew is no longer alone. But in doing so, she turned Harry into collateral damage. She knew that Harry's fierce, almost obsessive loyalty to Meghan is also his greatest vulnerability. His entire modern identity is built on the belief that he rescued a saint from an unjust system. If the saint was actually a part of that system all along, who is Harry now? The result was a total psychological implosion. Harry didn't lash out at Sarah. He withdrew. He began to scrutinize timelines he thought were settled. He began to replay memories of their early days in London through a new, distorted lens. The man who once believed love could conquer institutions now found himself craving the very thing he rejected: verification. This is what led to the DNA requests and the frantic pacing in the Montecito gardens. Sarah Ferguson didn't just plant a seed of doubt. She destroyed the foundation of Harry's sanctuary. She forced him to realize that in the world of the high-stakes elite, everyone is transactional, and his great escape might have been a carefully scripted entrance into a different kind of cage. The request for a private DNA test for Archie and Lilibet was not just a medical procedure. It was a psychological confession. It was the moment Prince Harry stopped being the protector and became the paranoid. For years, Harry's narrative was built on the foundation of protecting his family from the generational pain of the House of Windsor. He spoke at length about breaking the cycle, but in the cold, late hours of December 2025, the cycle didn't break. It closed its grip on him. By questioning the lineage of his children, Harry didn't just betray Meghan, he betrayed the boy he used to be. He became the very thing he spent a lifetime hating. To understand why this is a fatal blow to Harry's soul, we must look back to 1995. This was the year a young Prince Harry learned that his own father, then Prince Charles, had quietly sought paternity confirmation due to the cruel tabloid rumors surrounding Major James Hewitt. Although Charles was outwardly dismissive of the gossip, the act of verification left a permanent scar on Harry. It taught him that in the royal world, love is second to legitimacy, and trust is a luxury the crown cannot afford. Harry's modern life was supposed to be the antithesis of that coldness. He was supposed to be the father who just knew and just loved. But the first client seeds, planted by Sarah Ferguson, combined with the palace's absolute silence, have activated a dormant trauma. When Harry looked at Meghan after those revelations, he no longer saw the woman he rescued from the British press. He saw a potential architect of a new deception. The tragedy is that by requesting those tests, Harry has validated the palace's coldest assessment of him, that he is emotionally volatile and incapable of maintaining the stability required for a royal legacy. He has handed his enemies the ultimate proof that he has spiraled into the same paranoia that haunted his mother, Diana, in her final days. Meghan's response to this request has been described by insiders as a death blow to the marriage. She saw it not as a search for truth, but as a total surrender to the royal mind games they were supposed to have escaped together. The Sussex Empire was built on a shared story of us against the world. But now, Harry has made it me against you. The irony is chilling. Harry sought security from the palace to protect his family, but by the time the palace finished its grey rock strategy, Harry was the one destroying his family from within. He is trapped in a Montecito mansion that has become a hall of mirrors, where every reflection looks like the father he tried to flee and the institution he tried to burn down. Of all the demands Prince Harry submitted to Buckingham Palace in his desperate bid for a December return, one stood out as particularly detached from reality: the insistence that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, personally receive him upon his arrival. To the outside world, this might have looked like a brother-in-law seeking a bridge to reconciliation, but to the palace inner circle, it was recognized as a cynical attempt at image-laundering. Harry knows that Catherine is currently the most powerful spiritual asset the monarchy possesses. He didn't want a sisterly chat. He wanted the halo effect of her dignity to validate his return. But the response he received was the coldest of his life. Catherine's door is open only for truth, not for performance. Since her health crisis and the subsequent reset of her public image, Catherine has moved beyond being a mere fashion icon or a supporting royal. She has become the spiritual matriarch of the House of Windsor. While Harry was in Montecito liquidating his brand for streaming minutes, Catherine was undergoing a profound transformation, one that prioritized institutional stability over personal grievance. She has mastered the art of the active silence. By refusing to even acknowledge Harry's existence in her public narrative, she has effectively stripped him of his most potent weapon, his ability to cast himself as her equal. In the eyes of the palace, and increasingly the world, there is no equality between the woman who anchors the crown and the man who abandoned it. The irony for Harry is devastating. He once saw himself as the protector of his mother's legacy, yet it is Catherine who has actually fulfilled Diana's unfulfilled role. She has absorbed Diana's warmth, but tempered it with the late Queen's restraint. This is why Harry is so desperate for her validation. If Catherine stands at the gate to welcome him, the first client rumors, the DNA scandals, and the Hollywood failures are momentarily washed away by her grace. But Catherine, alongside Prince William and Princess Anne, has exercised her own form of institutional veto. She has made it clear that her recovery and her role as the future queen will not be used as a prop for a Netflix documentary or a strategic PR pivot. This rejection marks the end of Harry's ability to perform as a senior royal in exile. When the person who represents the future of the monarchy refuses to even see you, your exile is no longer just geographical, it is existential. Catherine's silence isn't a passive act, it is a tactical erasure. As Christmas approaches, and the Princess of Wales prepares to lead the family at Sandringham, Harry is left to realize that the bridge he burned wasn't just made of wood and stone, it was made of trust. And in the world of the new, lean monarchy, trust is a currency Harry has spent to the very last cent. He is discovering that the velvet glove of the princess can be just as heavy as the iron fist of the king. By late December 2025, the grand narrative of the great Sussex escape has reached its final, tragic chapter. The $14 million mansion in Montecito, once hailed as the ultimate symbol of liberation and eternal love, has transformed into a theater of transactional silence. The Sussex Empire was built on a shared story, a myth that Harry and Meghan were the only two people in the world who truly understood each other. But as the palace's iron shield held firm and the first client rumors began to rot the foundation of their trust, the myth died. What remains is not a marriage, but a joint venture in bankruptcy. The silence between them is no longer the peace they sought. It is the silence that forms when trust becomes conditional. The psychological shift within the house is devastating. For years, Harry defined his existence by his role as Meghan's protector. He saw himself as the man who succeeded where his father failed, the man who would keep his wife safe from the monsters of the institution. But the first client revelation, delivered so surgically by Sarah Ferguson, forced Harry to look at the woman across the breakfast table and see a stranger. If Meghan was indeed a part of the aristocratic underworld he despised, then his entire rescue mission was a delusion. The DNA test request was the final, irreversible act of war. You don't ask for a paternity test when you are in a sanctuary. You ask for one when you realize you've been living in a script you didn't write. Meghan, ever the strategist, has already begun her pivot. Insiders observe that she is no longer invested in the Sussexes as a unit. She is building a solo brand, one that detaches her from Harry's royal baggage and his spiraling mental health. In the brutal world of Hollywood PR, Harry has become a liability, a man whose constant grievances and identity collapse are bad for business. While Harry sits alone in the garden, obsessively scrolling through old photographs of his life in London, Meghan is in meetings, looking forward, calculating her next move. In a world that no longer finds the rebel prince interesting, she is a survivor. Harry is a casualty. This is the ultimate irony of Harry's exile. He sacrificed his family, his military titles, and his country to build a new empire for the woman he loved. But in doing so, he made himself entirely dependent on her approval. Now that her approval has been withdrawn, Harry has no floor beneath him. He has no palace to return to, no military brothers to lean on, and no wife to believe in. He is a man who burned every bridge behind him, only to find that the destination was a hall of mirrors where he is forced to face the one person he can no longer recognize, himself. The Sussex Empire didn't fall because of the press or the palace. It fell because the two people inside it stopped believing in the same lie. As the morning of December 25th, 2025, dawns over the frosted fields of Sandringham, the world is presented with a visual masterclass in institutional resilience. King Charles III leads the walk to Street Mary Magdalene Church, flanked by a united front. Prince William, the Iron Matriarch, Catherine, Princess Anne, and the next generation of the monarchy. There are no gaps in the line. There is no chaos, no scandal, and no mention of the name Harry. The palace has completed its surgical excision. The silence is not an accident. It is a final, crushing reality. In London, the crown has moved on. The story has reset, and for the first time in a decade, the House of Windsor is at peace because it has finally stopped reacting to the noise from across the Atlantic. 5,000 miles away, in a garden in Montecito that feels colder than it did a year ago, another scene unfolds. Prince Harry sits alone. He holds in his hands a letter from his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. Not the secret spiritual inheritance he is desperate to retrieve from the palace vault, but an old note from a life that no longer exists. He looks at a tree planted for his son, Archie, and tries to remember the man he was when he still believed that love alone could rewrite 1,000 years of history. The tragedy of Harry's exile is not that he was kicked out, it's that he walked out thinking he was headed for a throne of his own making, only to find himself sitting in a hall of mirrors. The anatomy of exile is now complete. We have watched the iron shield of Princess Anne close the gates. We have seen the first client rumors rot the foundation of the Sussex marriage. We have witnessed the brand bankruptcy in Hollywood and the devastating irony of Harry repeating his father's 1,995 DNA traumas. But the ultimate question remains: is Harry the villain of this story, or is he simply the boy who never stopped grieving? Since 1997, Harry has been running from the pain of his mother's death, trying to find a sanctuary where the world couldn't hurt him. He thought he found it in Meghan. He thought he found it in Montecito. But by burning the bridge to the only institution that defined him, he destroyed the only structure that could hold his grief. As the bells ring out at Sandringham, the world watches a family that has chosen duty over emotion. And in California, we see a man who chose emotion over duty, only to be left with neither. Harry's story is a cautionary tale for the modern age, that when you trade your birthright for relevance, you eventually lose both. He is no longer a prince, no longer a global thought leader, and no longer a part of the story he was born to help write. He is the ghost in the garden, visible to the world, yet structurally absent from the only place he ever truly belonged. The Sussex Empire hasn't just collapsed, It has vanished into the shadow of a crown that remains, as always, unmoved.